And instead of being grateful and honored and pinch yourself, I can't believe I get to do whatever it is that you do for work, we're like, well, yeah, but that person. Oh, yeah, but that person. But, oh, I suck compared to that person, And gosh, the line just keeps moving. It's a hamster wheel. It's just demonic, I think.
It's our limiting beliefs that ultimately keep us from becoming the best we're capable of becoming. Something's got to change, but that change has to happen first on the inside. It's time to get unstuck. It's time to get your why back. It's never too late. Let's start today.
Helping you design your roadmap to wholeness from the inside out. This is Win Today. And now, here's your host, Christopher Cook.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning in this week, and as always, thank you so much for the download. This is episode 172 of Win Today, and my friend, this is your roadmap to wholeness from the inside out. I'm so glad you've joined me today, because in today's conversation, we're diving into a topic that most likely plagues all of us at some point in time, and that is the issue of how to eliminate the need to hurry in life and instead create a pace that's both healthy and sustainable. Now listen, I know many of you listening right now are probably saying, Chris, you don't understand. I've got 3 kids that are needing something from me at every waking moment. So hurry is just something I have to live with. Period. End of story. But hey, I want to push back on that a little bit, because the pace at which I run myself, I've often been asking myself, in the process of this, in the process of doing what I need to do for the people who matter most in my life or for my job, who am I becoming when no one else is watching? Like when I go to bed at night, who am I becoming in my identity? Guys, no matter what pace you're running, that's a powerful question we all should be able to answer. And that's a question we're going to tackle with today's guest, John Mark Comer, as he teaches us how to stay emotionally healthy and spiritually active in the chaos of our modern world. Guys, buckle up. Please take some notes. Please listen with your heart. I believe this conversation is going to add a ton of value to you. So let's get to it right now. My conversation with John Mark Comer. Here it is. Well, John Mark, welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad you're here today.
Oh, it's such a joy to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, you're welcome. Well, John Mark, as we're talking today about the ruthless elimination of hurry, I want to begin by going back inside your story. What was life like when hurry was your normal?
Yeah, well, as if it's no longer like remotely a part of my body, or like I have won the battle against hurry, and I now live in a perpetual state of happiness, gratitude, presence to the moment, and unhurried bliss. Read my book, and you too can have all of your problems in life go away.
For 1995.
Exactly. I pull up the 3 easy steps to a problem-free, happy life. Oh, goodness. No. But yes, no, there is, on a serious note, there is definitely a me 5 years ago and a me today that I think are pretty radically different people, and radically different kind of ways of life and ways of being. And hurry is really one way, if you wanted to sum up that whole kind of shift in my life and trajectory change into one word, I'd say it's from a life of hurry to a life of something very different.
Describe something very different. What did that pace look like in your day-to-day rhythm?
Yeah, well, so I was on a team of people that planted a church 16 years ago, and it went really well by both Kingdom of Jesus metrics, health, life, people coming to faith, and by kind of American metrics of like numerical growth and budget and all of that kind of stuff. And the church grew really fast, was a mega church, really fast, and then kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. At the zenith kind of that, when I was, leading, this would have been maybe 6 years ago now, we had quite a few people. I was preaching 6 times on a Sunday. We had 93 employees on staff, I think, at one point. So just at that point, you become a CEO of an organization, not a teacher of the way of Jesus or a pastor, And I was working for the most part 6-ish days a week, and, would just get up kind of early, do my morning quiet time, and then just like get after it. The phone by that point had crept into my life, along with, hundreds of millions of other people around the Western world, and was rapidly eroding, stealing the very little free time that I had, and beginning to not just distract me, but then to addict me to that dopamine hit of another email, another text, another post, another thing, another like, another comment, another outrage cycle on the news, whatever, the dopamine hit of the moment is. And I had one day off, basically a week, and it was the worst day of my week. I was so exhausted. I would sleep in till, half the morning. I'd sleep away. I was just utterly exhausted. I'd wake up just in a foul mood, just grouchy, because I was crashing from just, a week of exhaustion. It was a very stressful kind of work and life season, even as God was doing all these beautiful things that were an answer to prayer and were a dream come true. But I didn't have either the spiritual formation. I didn't have the Christ-likeness, if you want to use that language, of character to hold it. And I didn't have what Eugene Peterson would call the rhythms of grace to sustain it. I didn't have a rule of life, a pace of life, a regimen of spiritual disciplines and friendships and emotional health and soul care and rest built into my life to be able to carry something of that magnitude at all. And it was just a life of speed and fast and faster and work. And that can sound like a little bit of a caricature, because that's not most people listening's story. And so well, okay, that's not me. I'm just a full-time parent, or I'm just a student, just a single professional who's 27 and working at my job or whatever. But I think, honestly, my story, that some of the, the megachurch background was maybe unique to me, but the rest of it's not. It's just like pretty common, like a millennial with a phone and coming into adulthood where you have a demanding job and then you have kids and then you're like, oh my gosh, why am I tired all of the time? And how much of that is just the health of adulthood and responsibility and reality of life this side of Eden, and how much of that is exacerbated by way larger both cultural forces outside from Facebook to the freeway, and then more internal subconscious soul and spiritual level forces of identity and fear and numbing our pain and finding ways to cope with life. John Ortberg, who's a hero of mine, has this great line that busyness isn't just a sign of a disordered schedule, it's a sign of a disordered heart. And I think, there's, when we talk about busyness, there's just like the practical aspect of busyness. If I just have too much to do, and what are life hacks, and how do I read this book or listen to this podcast and, simplify my life? But the problem is, you have to deal with the deeper underlying cause for busyness, which is different for each person. It could be a low self-worth, and busyness is a moniker for importance in our culture. When we say I'm busy, what we mean is I matter, really I do. So it could be an attempt to earn a sense of validation or self-worth. It could be an attempt to run away from the pain of a marriage that's disappointment, or a child that is, a relationship that's not going well, or a wound from your past. It could be an attempt to run to something, to try to get meaning. For most secular people, work has become a new religion. It's where they get their meaning in their community. So often busyness is a religious impulse almost. So it could be any number of things, but I think that the discussion around busyness is way more than just practical and what happened with the phone. It's like deeper, it's soul level conversation.
What I hear you saying, and this is the part which we could probably distill down and talk directly to every listener here today with us, is that in life, I think we'll either work from identity or for identity. In other words, the busyness, what I hear you saying is that the busyness can sometimes be an unattainable trap whereby we gather for ourselves worth and value and identity, and if we perform well, we are good, and if we make a mistake, we're bad. But instead, what I hear you saying, John Mark, is that there is a place, there's a rhythm that we can begin to put in motion in life whereby we then live from identity instead of for identity. Is that a fair statement to make?
Yeah, I think absolutely. And when you say working from identity, not for it, my mind immediately goes to Jesus' baptism, and how Jesus started his work as Rabbi Messiah, Son of God, after baptized in the Jordan River, voice of heaven, this is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased. And at a career level, he's not done anything. He's not saved the world. He's not taught the Sermon on the Mount. He's not healed a person. He's not cast out a demon. He's not fed 5,000 people. He's just been a son, growing in wisdom and stature and favor with God and man. And God is pleased with him and blesses him. And then out of that place of, I'm the beloved Son of God, and my Father is pleased with me. He does this incredible work. And I think when there's that inner emotional detachment where our identity does not rise and fall with our salary, our paycheck. For me, it would be, how many books I sell, or how many people listen to our podcast, or how many people, are like our church or are mad about me, or, whatever the thing is at our church level, whatever the metric is, which will be different for each person. When your identity and your self-worth, and even more than that, your sense of well-being isn't dependent on those metrics, some incredible things happen. One, you're emotionally freed up from the roller coaster of life, Two, you begin to focus on who you're becoming rather than attempting to manipulate the people and circumstances of your life to be just the way you want them so that you can have peace and be happy. You're just set free from that. And life becomes less about problem solving and more about just becoming a person of love with Jesus. Three, you're set free from fear. And fear makes us try to control people and events, which makes us hurt other people, manipulate relationships. And you're set free from that. And finally, what my favorite thing is, you get to approach your work totally differently because your well-being and your identity isn't based on it. So it's amazing how differently I do my work as a pastor or as a writer or whatever I do when I'm in a healthy space where this isn't my identity, this isn't my, it could all be taken away tomorrow and I'm still in the kingdom of God, and I'm not saying I always live that way, but when I'm in that emotional and spiritual place of my well-being is because I'm living with Jesus in the kingdom, not because church is going well or my book did well or Chris had me on the podcast or whatever it is, right. Or the podcast went great or I talked too much and made a fool of myself or whatever it is, as I am right now. When my well-being is disconnected from that, it enables me to approach my work with way more courage, way more wisdom, way more creativity to think outside the box, way more relational harmony with other people, way less ambition, and really to approach it more with love and wisdom and joy.
Isn't it interesting how when we pivot to that place, we often get the results we were after in the first place, and they're longer lasting, they're more satisfying. Again, back to what we said earlier, I think, because the good results are not an indictment in either case upon our identity. So, yeah,
it's so true. I could not agree more.
Quick plug for your podcast because you mentioned it. Folks, you got to check it out. Fight, Hustle, and Hurry. It's great, John Mark. Good job.
Oh, thanks, man. Thank you very much. I just mostly sit and chat to Jeff Bethke, so
well,
can't go wrong with Jefferson.
Yeah, you both are great. And what's interesting about it is I'm finding more and more conversations coming to the light, such as the one we're having right now, because I don't know, rewind 15 years ago, we're both millennials, but I think a lot of the self-help industry books that you'd find on the shelf at Barnes & Noble were 6 ways to do this, 10 ways to do this, find your whatever this way. And now what we're finding populating the shelves is get unhinged in your soul from the shame and from the fear and become the person you are always meant to be by coming into alignment with your identity. And so we're finding this messaging changing in culture, and I'm so glad for it. But I think what your book is a clarion call to all of us to say, hey, guys, slow down. In fact, I was just saying to a friend earlier today, the width of our work for the Lord isn't really the measure of success. It's effectiveness. It's faithfulness, right? And so what I hear you saying is how do we get to the place of staying faithful?
Yeah. I'm reading, I'm behind in I don't know if you do the read through Bible in a year thing, but I've done it ever since I was a little kid. And in classic fashion, I'm way behind on the Old Testament. So I'm ahead on the New Testament and behind on the Old Testament, which is pretty common for me. And so I'm reading through Jeremiah right now, and I read a bunch of it this morning because I'm playing catch up. And Jeremiah is such a fascinating case study but it's pretty hard to find a metric by which he was a successful prophet. Right. Nobody really listened to him. In fact, it was kind of the opposite. They basically just kept trying to kill him and imprison him and shut him up and threaten him. And then at the end, the very thing his dream was that people would have listened to him, Israel would have repented and not gone into exile. And or if they had, and then plan B was, all right, then they would have surrendered to the Babylonians and not all been killed and gone peacefully into exile. And at every level, or okay, plan C, those that are left behind will stay faithful to God and not be destroyed. And at every level, plan A, plan B, plan C, down the list, it doesn't happen. Failure, failure, failure. But yet he was a success, not because his work produced the desired outcome, but because he was faithful to God's call on his life. And I think Jefferson said that recently in a podcast we did, and it was such a great insight. He just said, in the kingdom of God, faithfulness is success.
Yeah.
It's really easy for me to think faithfulness leads to success, which I think it does as a general rule, because, I've been at a church now for 16 years. All of the best things in my life at a work level, at a church level, at a formation level, at a relational level are all like the result of years and years and years of cumulative add up, and I just think the human desire for to win the lotto at whatever level, and just have this breakout success in some area is such a fool's errand, it's such a fantasy. I think most, it's easy to perceive that at a work level. Well, that person just blew up, and that does happen sometimes, but really rarely. And most of the time there's a long backstory behind it. But I think, Jefferson was right. I love what he said that, in the kingdom, faithfulness is success. If we're faithful at some level, regardless of outcomes, we're successful. And Willard, who was really, I titled the book after Dallas Willard's line on the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, but he had this phrase that I think he got from Jan Johnson. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her, but she's a wonderful.
No.
Oh, she's beautiful. She's a writer down in Southern California, spiritual formation, spiritual director kind of person. And he got this language from her, and they both just have this language of abandoned outcomes. Like, we're responsible for our work, for our faithfulness, for our character before God, our humility, but we have to at some level abandon outcomes and just release that. But it's just out of our control, and it just produces anxiety internally and manipulation externally, and we just have to abandon that and just stay faithful before God.
I'm really curious about what you just said, and I'd love to drill down on that. You said it produces manipulation externally. What do you mean by that? That's fascinating.
Well, okay, what I mean by that is when we need our life, our work, our marriage, our church, whatever it is that we're talking about, to go a certain way in order to be happy, or in order to feel like we were successful, or in order to feel like we're good, we inevitably attempt to control the circumstances of our life, which we can't do, so that produces anxiety internally, and then manipulate other people and events to do what we think they need to do, either for their happiness or for ours, which often causes us to manipulate other people to our end. So, I mean, you could run this through the lens of marriage or parenting or work or pastoring, I'll just think about for me as a pastor, which is, I'm guessing, not most of the listeners, but for me, often, I'm in this situation where I'm with somebody and I really think that I know what our church needs to do, or I know what this person needs to do, and I really think that I'm right. But if I dishonor their human dignity, their freedom, their responsibility before God, and I attempt to make them do what I think they need to do, I have then crossed the line from leadership to coercion, manipulation, domination, control, even if I'm trying to get them to do something good, not something that's self-serving, And that's where people get hurt, people get run over, people never actually grow and mature because they don't make choices for themselves. Other people make choices for them. But how often does our need for our life to go a certain way cause us to manipulate and hurt other people around us to get them to do what we want? That the examples of this are legion.
It's really interesting because what you just described there points to two phrases that really caught my attention in your book, and the two are emotional unhealthiness and then shallow spirituality. You pointed to this in the early part of your book, and I'd love to ask John Mark, peeling back the curtain, what did both of those look like in your own life before you began to make a massive change?
Yeah, I mean, on the emotional level, just a lot of anxiety. I mean, I just live with I'm not a laid back person, so I just live with a lot of stress, a lot of kind of, low grade anxiety that would never go away, with periods of high grade anxiety. I was personally not very happy. I can be melancholic by nature, And so if I'm not really disciplined and with rhythms of kind of rest and renewal, I get to a pretty melancholy place pretty fast. I was really, for me, emotional unhealth is tied to relational unhealth. I was just really irritable, frankly, and on edge. And I can be, when I get unhealthy, I get really critical. That's just kind of how my personality goes. I can be kind of easily angered, but not an anger that's like a, fly off the seat of my pants and scream at people kind of anger. Not that we haven't all done that at times, but more of just like lots of sarcastic little digs or little kind of resentful comments that'll leak out when I'm tired or unhealthy or in a bad. And so this was just like, because I was not loving and joyful and peaceful, And so that was kind of my inner emotional relational state. And then spiritually, yeah, I was really faithful in the spiritual discipline regimen that I had been raised into in my church tradition, which was basically go to church on Sunday, tithe, and have a morning quiet time where you read the Bible and do intercessory prayer. And there's a little bit more than that, but those are kind of the three anchor things. And I'm really grateful. Those are all still in my rule of life, in my muscle memory. I don't say that to disparage those three at all.
Sure.
I just think that it wasn't a holistic enough expression for me. And you can do those three things and not become a person of love. And you can do those things and still not be self-aware and still be overworked and still be exhausted all the time and still not experience God's love and God's presence. So I think those three disciplines were really like part of my life, but as I grew just more and more distracted by my phone, more and more exhausted by just work and then entering kind of adulthood and the responsibility of life and leadership, and more anxious and kind of unhealthy at an emotional level, I just felt more and more disconnected from God and disconnected from my own soul. More and more when I'd actually come to moments of quiet, I couldn't focus, I couldn't pay attention, I couldn't hear God's voice in my mind or heart, I couldn't feel God's presence or his love. I mostly just felt anxiety and anger were the main emotions that I felt at that point. And it was really hard for me to really have vibrant, rich, luxuriant kind of connection with God because I was just so hurried and so busy.
So let's make this super personal for the listeners, John Mark. What are some of the key warning signs that we all need to be keenly aware of as we're going throughout the day? Here's what I'm getting at is I think, and I know this for myself as a type A personality, I love to achieve, I love to get things done, I love to work hard, but overextended and under stress, I then normalize that dysfunction, and I think it's normal.
Yep.
And because we don't know what we don't know, what are some key warning signs that you saw in your life and that we should look at in our own life to make sure, whoa, we need to pump the brakes pronto?
Yeah. Okay, what comes to mind is Ruth Haley Barton. Are you familiar with her work? Have you
Absolutely.
read anything by her?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Brilliant.
Yeah, she's wonderful. And she has 10, I forget her exact language, but basically 10 signs that you're moving too fast through life. So let me just quote her. I don't know that I can do all 10 off the top of my head, but let me get through as many as I can remember. Her first one, I think, is irritability, meaning you just you're easy, like underneath the surface of close interpersonal relationships, you're easily agitated. Second one is hypersensitivity, like minor things become major, minor setbacks become major emotional blocks, or you're just hypersensitive, or you're quick to like get defensive or blame shift or play the victim or deny or defend yourself. Third is restlessness, like when you actually do slow down to rest, you try to practice Sabbath or take a day off or have a night home, like you can't rest, you're too tired to fall asleep, your mind is racing, or you have to turn on the TV, turn on the music, grab your phone again because like of the dopamine withdrawal thing, like you need stimuli because you're so addicted to stimuli and hurry and noise and muchness and manyness and all of that kind of stuff. Let me see what else is on there. One is, I'm sure these aren't in order, but not attending to human needs. You're not sleeping enough, some exercise, cooking your own food, drinking enough water, you start over-caffeinate, over-carb, over-eat out, One is disconnected from identity and calling, meaning you kind of lose track of who am I again or who am I not? What am I called to do? What am I not called to? What's my identity and calling? And so then you get sucked into the tyranny of the urgent and you begin to live more and more reactive and less proactive in what God's called you to.
Yeah.
I think your last one is like slippage in spiritual practices. So the very spiritual disciplines that actually create space for you to come back to your soul and connect with God and remember who you are and what you're called to do and be filled with joy and love and peace. The very things that we actually need more of, the more pressure we're under and the more responsibility we have, are often the first ones to go. So those are just some, like, that's not the full 10, but those are some signs that even if you're happy, and that's the thing, is like my personality, this is in a sense a blessing and a curse. I'm too melancholic by nature to where I have this type A part of me that is just super task driven, and I can just work insane hours, grind through on willpower and duty and work ethic and get a lot done, but I'm really miserable. Not only am I a bear to be around, but I'm like really unhappy and anxious. And so I have this melancholy kind of nature that makes my emotional limit. I have a pretty high capacity task-wise, but a pretty medium to normal capacity, or maybe even low capacity emotional-wise. And so that's a really interesting dynamic just for me personally. But a lot of other people I know who do have a higher emotional capacity, they're just like, there's just some people that are just really type A, pretty happy, sanguine people with just kind of a ridiculous capacity. It's not most of us. I don't know what percentage of the population it is, 5 or 10%. But even those people, when you pay attention, if you actually start to pay attention to how loving they are in interpersonal relationships with people they're close to, and how close they are to God, in the sense of, then even those people, I think they live far beyond their relational and spiritual capacity.
Well, I want to make a point for all the listeners today, because today we are talking about the ruthless elimination of hurry, and that is the title of your new book. But I want to get inside of that title even more specifically. John Mark, what do you think is the lead up to the place of hurry? Because I know you even identify hurry as the great spiritual enemy in your book, which is fascinating in and of itself. But is it insecurity? Is it fear? Is it shame? What do you think really keeps hurry alive?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I don't think there's one answer for like the human race. You know what I mean? I think there's 1,000 answers for 1,000 people. At some level, because it has to do with soul, there are common answers, I think. So I guess I would think about it through two lenses, and this is kind of, or two levels or two layers, and this is kind of how I do spiritual formation and pastoral work at this level too. At one layer, there's just like the basic kind of practical stuff of life. That is just like rule of life stuff, like how do you live, habits, practices, routine, schedule, budget, that kind of stuff. And at that level, you have a couple major things that come to play. That the number one, like, great enemy, the hurry producer, I think, is the phone and just all things digital addiction. I mean, Silicon Valley, and there's some wonderful people there, but basically the way that the digital industry has grown up, in particular social media and the app kind of world that we live in, is most of it is its income, its business model is designed around attention. So, economists call it the attention economy. We want to believe that we're the customer, but we're not the customer, we're the product. When we go into Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or whatever, we're not the customer, we're the product. What Facebook is selling is our data and our attention to other people so they can market to us at emotion and chart out through data and algorithms when we're most emotionally vulnerable and open to manipulation to marketers to buy their product or do their thing, right? So what they're selling is our attention, which means that they have to design products that are specifically designed to distract us and then to addict us because they want to steal our attention so they can monetize our attention. So, you know what I mean? So I would have very little of a problem with Facebook or Instagram if it was like $10 a month. I would pay $10 a month in a heartbeat to have a version of Instagram that isn't designed to distract me, that's actually designed just for me to see the wonderful life of my friends. But that's not what we have. It's a very different thing. So I know that's kind of super negative and Luddite, and if you're listening and you work in tech, you can hate me all you want. I'm sorry, I don't mean it. We have to talk about, I do mean it. We have to talk about the reality of digital distraction. So I think that's a major thing that if you have a phone or Wi-Fi access, you're struggling with this. Another major thing that we don't think about a lot is just the rise in the standard of living for many people in our country. So over the last half century, two things have happened. Basically,
yeah.
the poor have gotten poorer and the middle class have gotten wealthier. And so while there's a lot of talk about the middle class is shrinking, which is totally true. But if you're listening to this podcast, you're most likely the part of the middle class that's actually getting wealthier. So the average podcast listener, I just read stats on it the other day, has a bachelor's degree and makes $70-something thousand a year. The average kind of the kind of people that listen to podcasts on iPhones are tend to be, and if you're not that, don't feel bad at all. But that's most likely the kind of demographic that you are. If you're hearing this right now through your Apple earbuds or whatever that cost $150, So with that, with the rise in standard of living comes a whole increase in speed. So a lot of this just comes down to wealth and materialism. Alan Fadling has this great line: "The drive to possess is an engine for hurry," meaning the more that we want, the more that we have to work to pay for everything, and the more that we have to do to like cram in all the stuff we own, or activities or experiences or motorcycles or boats or fishing or trips or whatever the thing is, This exacerbates our hurry. And there's all sorts of, we can talk about it, there's all sorts of fascinating kind of background behind how everybody expected in the 1950s and 60s, as technology was changing, that by now we'd all be living the Jetsons life. We'd be working, 10 or 20 hours a week and just playing golf and having fun, and robots would be doing everything for us. But the exact opposite has happened. Actually, work hours has gone significantly up. We work way more than we did in the 50s and 60s on average. And leisure time has actually it's almost been cut in half, depending on which study you read. And then the time that we have is normally swallowed up by our devices. And basically, economists argue that we chose money over time. So we basically chose to up our standard of living rather than decrease the number of hours that we work to make space for leisure, whatever that is for each of us. So that's a fascinating kind of thing there. And then I think a third thing is just urbanization, even if you're in a suburban context, but just noise, cars, freeways, busyness. In particular, if you're in a city like I am, and I'm not even in New York or San Francisco, I'm not even in a major city, but a city is basically, cities are basically for two things: work and play for grown-ups. That's basically what cities are for. And so those just consume eons of your time, just tons of your time goes to working and killing it in your career. And then with the money that you make from your career, your job or whatever, like if you're middle class and up, which again is not a ton of people, so I say that with all sorts of sensitivity, but then you eat out and you go do the thing and you go to this activity and you go hiking or, whatever you do based on kind of your personality and what city you're in. So I think those three things in particular, there's a lot more. And then I would argue that secularism is another major factor.
Indeed.
And that ties into your identity thing. Because I think if you don't have an identity as a beloved son or daughter of God, and you don't have a concept for eternity, then what you're left with is, I am what I do, what I have, and the pleasure I get, and I have this one short life to carpe diem, and I got to get it all in. And that's just and I'm not saying all secular people think that way. I know some lovely secular people that have a much healthier view of life. But I do think the secular narrative of you're an animal, this whole thing's an accident, once you die, you're done, so go out and have pleasure. And particularly as defined by America, which means have money, which means work and be busy. Man, I think this is just an engine for hurry. So those are the kind of like practical things. But then to your other more important question, and I don't want to overtalk here, that's just layer one. You solve all of those problems and you still have hurry in your body. Layer two, like that's the really interesting thing for me, that's the spiritual kind of level, is like why beyond, if you were to take away Facebook and Wi-Fi access and the city, and it would solve a huge amount of our problem. I don't know what percentage, 50%, 60, 70%, but it wouldn't solve the hurry problem, because there's a hurry busyness issue that is a deeper layer down. That is what we were talking about a minute ago: identity, self-worth, insecurity, how we manage our pain, how we manage disappointment, what we do to feel good in life and look good in life and feel good about who we are. These deeper issues and questions of motivation, identity, pain, happiness, where we get our contentment from. These are that's the whole other kind of more psycho-spiritual level that I'm really interested in.
Well, in your story, you use this example, and I know when we get to this place of perhaps even nearing burnout, there's the great need to take a huge reset. And often for many leaders, it's a sabbatical. But I'd love to know, inside your own story, John Mark, what do too many people, maybe even too many leaders, overlook when it comes to the lead up to even needing the extended rest in the first place? In other words, is it not taking a daily pulse, a monitoring of your soul on a daily basis? Like, what do you think leads up to that point of going, I've got to completely stop for a season?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting to see how a sabbatical or an extended vacation or a year off, a certain job or whatever it is, depending on your level of privilege and flexibility, how it works incredibly well for other people and it doesn't do anything for other people. And that's because it's a fallacy to think what I need is a break. If you're burned out, what you most likely need is a change of way of life. Mm-hmm. So a break is an essential thing. I needed a long break. I want another one in a couple of years. And I'm an advocate for regular long vacations, sabbatical kind of long breaks, and more in the business community, even in our city. I think of Nike that, you get, sure. I think it's 7 weeks every 7 years, or, in addition to your vacation, like mini sabbaticals. Intel's in town too. They do something, I think it's 6 or 7 weeks every 5 years. Don't quote me. But
wow.
It's becoming more and more common in the business world because there's all sorts of science behind it now, and data, and employee retention is way better. And that's, major cost for businesses is training new employees, so transients, mm-hmm. and blah, blah, blah. So it's becoming a conversation, I think, in culture at large. But a sabbatical won't fix any of your problems. It can just become an escape from your problems.
Oh, that's good.
And so, Parker Palmer, have you read his little book, Let Your Life Speak?
I haven't, but I am super familiar with his work.
Yeah, he has a beautiful little book. It's short read, and it's about calling and vocation. Let your life speak. And he has a great line in there about burnout, and he tells his story with burnout. And he basically says to the effect that, this is not a verbatim quote, but he says that burnout isn't always the result of giving too much. Sometimes it's the result of attempting to give something that's not ours to give in the first place.
Wow.
So that might be an introvert trying to, kill it in an extrovert's job, or it might be, or something else, whatever the example is. And so I think that when we're dealing with burnout, part of the problem is, just life is hard and we need an extended break. But most likely the deeper problem is like the pace of life, the level of capacity that I'm at, my rule of life, my hours that I work, my rhythms of rest, all of this is not sustainable. I need to actually change how I live. Mm-hmm. And then the even deeper issue is like, what was I made by God to do? What was I put here to do? And how is my life, my work, my church experience, my relationships, how is this expressing or not expressing my identity before God? And those are the things that even if you take a long break and even if you're really good about Sabbath, will still not solve your problem of burnout, because you're attempting to live in a way that's unsustainable and you're attempting to give something that's not yours to give. And so that's where a sabbatical can be a great break. It was for me, but only if you seriously reevaluate how you're living and come back and live differently.
That's really powerful. John Mark, in your book, you talked about how the addiction to hurry will not be broken by willpower. We're just not strong enough to sustain that. So what breaks the addiction then?
Yeah, I think grace and community, habits, grace, community. That's kind of my little working theory of change. First, you need a vision of a life that isn't hurried. But then you need, people often just take a vision of, a slower life. That sounds great. I'm inspired by this podcast. I read this book. It was aspirational. I'm going to slow down. And then absolutely nothing happens, because then you just get sucked right back into the busyness of phone and life and work and career and 3 kids and, city living and all the stuff. So what you need is that trifecta of habits or practices or spiritual disciplines, of grace and kind of the Spirit's empowering presence in your life, that the practices make space to receive, and then community to walk with you and hold you accountable. So as we have counter habits to the busyness of our culture, like Sabbath and silence and solitude and quiet and simplicity, or whatever it is for you based on where you're at and what you prefer, as we make space in our life for grace, for the Holy Spirit to do by the power of the Spirit what willpower or our spirit's power doesn't have the capacity to yet, and to even increase and grow the muscle of our own willpower to eventually where it can do these things, and then community to journey with us and hold us accountable. I think that's how we actually slow down. We start with counter habits, we make space for grace, and we live in community that holds us to it.
I love in your book, you quoted Eugene Peterson, where he talked about living freely and lightly, and I love that description. That was so rich. But the secondary motion behind that, I think, is learning about spiritual disciplines. I'd love to just get tactical for a moment with you, John Mark. Teach us about some really critical spiritual disciplines that can be employed inside our personhood, that are unique to us, that help us connect with the Lord.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so many. Like, the way of Jesus is such a rich tradition, as you know, stretching back thousands of years. I mean, you have practices like Sabbath that are at least 3,000 years old, if not much older than that, And so there's this beautiful, rich tradition of East and West and African and male and female and different eras and different personalities. And there's so much breathing room and space and wonder inside each of these practices, or spiritual disciplines, as they're often called in the Western world. And, I come from a church tradition where we didn't really use that language. And if we did, it was kind of in a bit of a negative light. Spiritual disciplines were kind of legalistic, or people thought of them as earning God's love or rule following, or they just kind of have this negativity around them, which is really tragic. And spiritual disciplines, or practices as I prefer to call them, are they're all a means to an end. The end is to live in the kingdom with Jesus, to live a life of abiding, to live joyfully and freely and lightly, as Peterson said, which I love. And he calls them in that same, it's his paraphrase of Matthew chapter 11. His translation is rhythms of grace. I love, that's what he calls spiritual discipline.
So good.
Rhythms of grace. What are these relational rhythms, habits, practices, morning routines, spiritual disciplines that just make space for the grace of God, the presence and the power of God to well up from the inside of you out, and just to help you to live freely and lightly? So I name 4 in the book that I think have been especially helpful in my life in slowing down, and they are silence and solitude, Sabbath, simplicity, which is kind of like the Christian version of minimalism, and then slowing, which is kind of a more recent update. I'm stealing from Richard Foster here and John Ortberg and others who actually have called slowing a spiritual discipline and done some teaching at length on it. And those are the 4 that I named. There's many more like crucial, beautiful spiritual disciplines, from scripture reading to fasting to church on Sunday, that are beautiful and essential. But these are the 4 that I really name for kind of slowing down your life.
Well, I've been on a personal trek for simplicity myself, and it's in my belongings, it's in my social footprint, it's in the noise I'm surrounded with, and John Mark, I'm to the point, especially after reading your book, I'm like, man, I crave this even more. And so, having written this book and now having a platform on which to stand to speak about this from a life well lived, and a life that has been hurried, John Mark, how have you simplified your life really practically in the last couple of years, maybe in the last 5 years since this journey started?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. But first, can you indulge my curiosity? Like, what brought you into that journey around simplicity? How did you get to there?
Yeah. Oh, wow. What a great question. I'd love to step into that. So one of the things I began to notice in my own life, in my soul, and I think you wrote about it, is this undercurrent, almost the best way I can describe it, is like a buzzing of anxiety.
Yeah.
And it's this thing that is not loud and verbose, but instead is sedated, and it's like that little hum that you have inside of your home because of an electronic device, but it just stays there, and it so normalizes itself that you think, oh, this is just the way it is. So I got to the place of saying, wait a minute, I don't actually think this is normal. And so my first thing I did was to do a simple 1 week social media fast, and I endeavored to journal throughout it, to kind of take note of how my body felt, how my cognition existed, what I thought about myself in my identity. And John Mark, it was pretty remarkable as I got to a day about 5 or 6. And I thought, oh my gosh, I like myself even more. I don't even feel the need to pick up the phone.
Wow.
And then I really got to the place of saying, it doesn't matter how much green juice or kale salad I pound, if my body is full of stress, anxiety, perhaps even unforgiveness, bitterness, regret. My body is going to have a counteracting effect upon the very good nutrients that I'm putting in my body. And it's, even as we talked about before we got on the show here today, my passion for wholeness, because I don't care how much green juice we pound, if we're full of the negative emotions that don't lead us to a place of wholeness, then we're going to dead end anyway. And so I got to the place, to answer your question, John Mark, of saying, I can't live like this. This is unsustainable. I am on a rat race, so to speak. And whether or not I admitted it, the truth is I thought until this happens, I won't be completely fulfilled as a man of God. And if plus when equals then became very, very dysfunctional math in my own life.
Explain that to me. If plus when equals then?
Yeah. If this, sure. If this happens by this time or this date, then I'll be fulfilled. Then I'll finally have joy. Then I'll.
Yes.
And a lot of times when I preach about this, I talk about it in the context of relationships, and it happens in the case of a lot of young adults with dating relationships, of course, but you can apply that. I can apply that at least to really any area of my life. Until the podcast hits X amount of downloads, then I'm not really success. Or until I get X amount of speaking engagements, whatever,
Nothing, but then the line keeps moving. And you know what I mean? In my experience, success feels just like money. The more you get, the more you want. What's the Rockefeller line? How much money is enough? Just a little bit more.
Yep.
And I think all work success feels exactly the same. And then no matter how well you do, there's always people doing way better than you,
For sure.
And instead of being grateful and honored and pinch yourself, I can't believe I get to do whatever it is that you do for work. We're like, well, yeah, but that person. Oh, yeah, but that person. But, I suck compared to that person, And gosh, the line just keeps moving. It's a hamster wheel. It's just demonic, I think.
Yeah, I got to the place, in fact, I don't know, I had a pretty sizable speaking engagement, if you will, back in June. And I remember coming to the place of the Lord really working in my heart, John Mark. And I remember it was a Saturday afternoon. I was folding laundry on my couch at home alone. And I felt like the Father said, Chris, I love you as much folding socks and folding t-shirts as when you preach your heart out. And it hit me first intellectually, and I went, I appreciate that. And then it hit my heart, and it melted me.
Wow. Wow. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Yeah, I think similar to you, I think I got into simplicity first through work. And not just through virtue, but just, you get kind of the farther you get down your path in your career, you develop. You read Cal Newport's stuff at all? I love some of the stuff around work. Yeah.
Digital minimalism is absolutely brilliant.
Yes. Have you read any of his previous stuff?
Deep Work?
So good they can't ignore you.
I've started okay, I got to admit. Oh boy, this is bad.
No,
whatever. I've started Deep Work, but because of hurry, it's not that I didn't enjoy it. I put it down and somehow I just didn't pick it up again, and maybe I need to pick it up again.
I love it. No, it's fantastic. Really simple, but fantastic. I think it's in Deep Work. Maybe it's actually in his book before that, So Good They Can't Ignore You. He has this phrase of vocational equity, meaning like the better you get at your job, the more equity you kind of build up, meaning the more sense to kind of really angle at having just the right job for you. And again, this is a privileged thing. This is a middle class thing. I totally recognize this is not a ton of people's experience. But I think it's beautiful when it works out that way, when people can get really good at something and keep honing in on what they're like best at. I think, starting to feel more and more like a craftsperson, woman or man. I think that doesn't happen for everybody and can't, but I think that's beautiful when it does happen. And for me in particular, in my kind of field of work, teaching, writing, speaking, that makes a lot of sense for what I do. And so I think I got into it a little bit through work, like just really trying to focus, from being like this pastor who does everything to really kind of focusing on my craft of teaching and writing and that whole thing. And that requires just simplicity. That requires you've got to be pretty ruthless about what you cut out and what you give your time to and how you structure your week, and disciplines, which for me would be things like reading and study and write, like real like strict disciplines. That then brought me into some pretty early unease around the phone. Like, you can't like do the kind of work that I do, which requires long, undistracted hours of reading, thinking, writing, deep, what Newport calls deep work.
Exactly.
You can't do that on the phone anywhere close to you. You can't even be in the same room as you.
Right.
At least I can't, and not do good work, So that brought me into kind of a what he calls digital minimalism, like really beginning to police my phone and have some pretty strict rules around that. And then this is so embarrassing, but in all honesty, for years I just really struggled with Jesus' teachings around money. In all honesty, they sounded really unpleasant to me.
Mm-hmm.
I would hear what Jesus said about money and his call to simplicity and generosity, and it just sounded like a depressing way to live. That was right. I didn't question it like biblically or ethically. It just, in all honesty, I would not have said this out loud, but it just sounded like a really unhappy, unpleasant way to live. And this is so embarrassing, but it's just the truth. I got into the Christian discipline of simplicity through secular people, through Joshua Fields Milburn and the Minimalists. If you follow their work at all, they started as a blog, then they wrote books, then they did a podcast. Now they have a Netflix documentary out. And I started following their work a number of years ago, and got into kind of the secular minimalism movement, which is, all about how do you live with less and da-da-da-da. Yeah. And it appealed to me, and I started dabbling with it, and the more stuff that I would get rid of, the more joyful I would be, and the more things I would cut out, the more at peace I would feel. And then that brought me into this, multi-thousand-year-old Christian tradition of simplicity, is more the Christian name for it, of living with a high degree of focus and intentionality around a life of abiding and of doing the work that God's called each of us to do. So it's embarrassing to admit that I got into it not through Christian teaching, but through secular teaching. And then I began to experiment with what Jesus has been saying for thousands of years and find it to be incredibly life-giving, joyful, that a life of simplicity and generosity, in particular with money and possessions, is a wonderful way to live, a happy way to live. I mean, Jesus said it is happier to give than to receive. And I have slowly but surely, in my very imperfect way, and I'm not living some life of poverty. I live very well, have a very comfortable, wonderful life. But I have just so far totally found that to be true. So that's kind of how I got. I think it was kind of work to phone to possessions. That was kind of the track. And that got me pretty into the practice of simplicity.
Powerful. Well, one of the pivot places I wanted to come into as we land the conversation today, John Mark, is a very effective yet very simple word to set boundaries and perhaps to help eliminate hurry in our life, and that's the word no. Would you give us any tips that you might have about learning to employ no in our life more effectively?
I immediately think of Anne Lamott's line, no is a complete sentence.
It really is. Yeah.
Oh man, it's so hard, Chris. I feel like, there's nothing that I would say right now that the listeners haven't always heard 1,000 times. No is a complete sentence. Say no. If it's a maybe, it's a no. All the good stuff out there. I find it incredibly hard to say no. I feel bad when I say no. I feel mean when I say no. I feel unpastoral when I say no. I feel exhausted and stressed out when I say yes.
Yeah.
It's such a, I hate it. And I wish I am not the like bright shining example of this is how you say no, da 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 da. And so I don't have a silver bullet for that. What's been really helpful for me, I guess, is two things at a practical level. Is one, just I practice a fixed hour schedule, which I know doesn't work for everybody. It would be terrible for a full-time parent or whatever. But my work week and even my days and my day off even is pretty structured. And that enables me to say I have this many hours per week for whatever the thing is, and if it fits in there, great. And if not, I'll have to do it another week. We'll schedule out, And that enables me to put some really clear on there. It's literally, I have my calendar in front of me right now on my laptop open, and it has my fixed hour schedule on it, and I know what I can do. Past that time, sorry, can't do it, unless if it's some extenuating thing. So that's really helpful. And then having like a little, what's the line that people keep using, but a personal advisory board, I think is in the self-help.
Yes.
Yeah, but just having a couple people that are with me that help me, so for me that would look like, do I say yes to certain speaking engagements or or church activities, or are we going to run, I always have ideas for church, and then there's the question of, is this idea from the Spirit, or is this just a random idea I read or got from somebody else, and running things through a couple people that kind of help me and I help them navigate decision making in life. That's been really helpful. But honestly, it's not a silver bullet. I still say yes to things I should say no to, and no to things I should say yes to. And it is just a daily discernment process with Jesus as I'm trying to grow and mature to a really high. I'd love to reach a really high level of maturity in that department, and it's been tricky. And I can't say I have that one down. I can say that I'm committed to becoming the kind of person who says no in a healthy way and has a really robust discernment muscle to know what to say no to and what to say yes to. But I'm very much still en route to becoming that kind of a person.
Me too. Is there a question you wish more people asked you?
Yeah, I guess I wish that I heard more people ask questions in general, but more people ask how questions, and specifically, how do we become more like Jesus? How do we become more loving? How do we become more joyful? How do we become more peaceful? I don't know if it's my pastoral seat or what, but I get a lot of why questions, like why this? Why do we do that? Why does the Bible teach that? Why are we saying that? Or what questions? What's right? What's wrong? What's true? What's biblical? What's not? And those are important, very important questions. But I think the older I get, the more I'm interested in some of the how questions, like how do we actually change, grow, mature? How do we experience freedom? How do we become the kind of people who don't have to manipulate other people to get what we want? How do we become the kind of people that are content and grateful and happy even when life doesn't go the way we want it to? How do we live in reality and not in a fantasy world? How do we, not get sucked into our phones? Like those how questions. People do ask them, but I wish people asked them more, and I think those are just really healthy. Even when you don't have the answers, I think they're really healthy questions to sit with.
Some of the best leaders I've ever worked with, have encountered, have repeatedly said, my goal as a leader isn't to tell people what to think, but rather how to think. And I think that pings right to what you just said. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, interesting. It's great. Love that.
Yeah. John Mark, is there anything else that we haven't talked about today that you would want to leave with the listener as we land the plane today?
Just that question that I put it in the book, but out of my own story, but just a healthy, as you're sitting around thinking about all of this, I think it's worth asking the question, who am I becoming? And again, I really think about life more and more through the lens of spiritual formation, and there's just this process of who we become and who we don't become, and what's the trajectory of our soul, and are we becoming more or less loving? Are we moving off of the kind of egoic operating system to a life of agape or self-giving love, or staying locked in the prison of our egoic, my wants, my needs, my fears, my need for life to go this way? How do we get free from that and move toward love, So I think it's just a really sober but healthy, joyful question to ask. Jesus would say these really haunting lines like, what will it profit a person if they gain the whole world but lose their soul? And I think that's a sober question, but it's actually a really joyful and freeing question. Like he's saying, you don't have to get sucked into what in our day and age is the hurry and the distraction and the materialism and the idolatry and the secularism and the insecurity and the anger of our culture. Like, you can live freely and lightly. But you have to take up your cross, is what Jesus said. You have to live a pretty radically different way, and you have to yield from the inside out and surrender to Jesus' love and His way of life. And so I think that's something that I think more people should talk about.
That's so good. Folks, the book is The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, How to Stay Emotionally Healthy and Spiritually Alive in the Chaos of the Modern World, and boy, is it chaotic. He is John Mark Comer. John Mark, thank you so much for joining me today. I love this message, and I so appreciate you just coming to the plate with vulnerability and authenticity. What a great conversation. Thank you.
Oh, it's been an honor to chat with you. Thank you for your work. Anything for the growth of the soul makes me really happy toward wholeness, man. So
Amen.
keep up the amazing work, and all of you listening, keep listening, and may you continue to grow and thrive with Jesus.
Hey, I hope you really enjoyed that conversation with John Mark Comer, and I'd really encourage you, go to the show notes at wintoday.tv right now, grab a copy of his brand new book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. I know it's going to add a ton of value to your life. Well, hey, my friends, listen, next week here on the show, we're diving into an encore conversation because it's December and it's Christmas season. So I'm going to give you 2 weeks, for the next 2 weeks here on the show, of 2 of your favorite episodes. And coming at you next week is a conversation I had with the one, with the only Erwin McManus. It has just topped the charts of your favorite conversations I've ever had here on the show. So I'm really excited to bring you that conversation once again. And in case you forgot, here's a preview of my conversation with Erwin McManus.
One of the keys to inner peace is to stop living your life for the affirmation of others and by the opinion of others. And when you choose to be invisible, what that means is that you live a life to serve rather than to be seen. You resolve in your own heart that if what you do matters, it doesn't matter if someone knows what you do.
Guys, buckle your seatbelt. I'm really excited to rerun my conversation with Erwin McManus right here next week on the show. Stay tuned. Hey, many of you are brand new listeners of Win Today, and for that, I just want to say thank you. So if you haven't done so already, be sure to hit that subscribe button right now on whichever podcast host you're tuning into. And each and every week, a fresh episode of the show will arrive to you automatically. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, will you take 30 seconds right now to rate and write a review of the show? Doing so helps grow the listenership of Win Today, and that would mean so much to me. Well, hey, until next week, visit me over at wintoday.tv for blog posts and archive podcasts, all aimed at helping you design your roadmap to wholeness from the inside out. Have a great week. We'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.